Good evening. I'm Mayor Jen Wallison, and welcome to the Menlo Park City Council's January 24th regular City Council meeting. This is a hybrid meeting with City Council, city staff, and members of the public participating in City Council chambers in accordance with public health guidelines for in-person meetings and participating remotely to promote social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. I'd like to begin this evening with a moment of silence. As we all know, the tragic events that have occurred in our state, first in Southern California and most recently in Half Moon Bay. And our hearts and thoughts are with those, especially in San Mateo County, who are feeling the impact with the latest shootings. So in solidarity with the city of Half Moon Bay, I'd like to take this moment for silence, please. Thank you all. And we all know that silence can display solidarity, but action speaks much louder than words and silence. With that, we will move on to roll call. I would like to introduce City Council members and staff present. Vice Mayor Cecilia Taylor is joining us remotely. City Council members Maria Dorr and Betsy Nash are here in council chambers, and City Council Drew Combs is absent this evening. Staff present include City Manager Justin Murphy, Assistant City Attorney Denise Bizzano, and City Clerk Judy Herron. With that, Ms. Herron, would you please provide instructions to the City Council and members of the public on how this meeting will proceed?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Willison. And again, echoing a welcome to our January 24th regular City Council meeting. For members of the public who wish to provide comment on any of tonight's agenda items, for those of you participating in person, we'll ask that you complete a comment card at that back table. You can return it up to me at the clerk's desk. For those of you participating virtually, after the mayor calls for public comment on that item, we'll ask that you engage that hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in from a landline or a cell phone, you can press *9 at that time. That concludes my introductions, and Mayor Willison, you may continue.
Thank you, City Clerk Herron. Agenda review. Agenda review provides advance notice to members of the public and city staff of any modifications to the agenda order and any requests from City Council members under City Council member reports. Does any member of the City Council wish to pull or modify any agenda item? Councilmember Dorr.
Yes, I'd like to pull F3 from the consent calendar.
Thank you. Councilmember Taylor, did you have any items?
Yes, Mayor Willison, and just a question on F4.
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor. So when we get to the consent calendar, we'll be pulling F3 and F4 for discussion and questions. We're now going to move on to D, public comment. Under public comment, the public may address the City Council on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the City Council once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. You are not required to provide your name or city of residence, but it is helpful to the City Council. The City Council cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the City Council cannot respond to non-agenda items brought up under public comment, other than to provide general information. I will call for public comment at the appropriate time for members of the public to address the City Council on any item under agenda sections. Those include presentations and proclamations, consent calendar, regular business, and informational items. So City Clerk Herron, will you please now call for general public comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Willison. So at this time, if any member of the public wishes to provide comment for an item not on tonight's agenda, for those of you in person, please complete a speaker card on that back table and you can return it to the clerk's desk. For those of you participating virtually, please engage that hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in from a landline or a cell phone, you can press *9 at this time. And our first speaker will be Tom McRae.
So members, thank you so much. My name is Tom McRae. I'm the coach of Solo Aquatics. Solo Aquatics is a nonprofit youth 501c3 program that first became located in Menlo Park in 1994. I've been with Solo since that time. And the reason for my addressing the council tonight is the fact that the RFP is about to be awarded. It's in the works. And I'd like to bring council's attention to the process that has happened over time. And the first part of that is that Solo actually was part of passing Measure T in the building of the facility. When the facility opened, it was unknown what the cost would be to operate the facility. And as a result, city staff called Morgan Hill, and Morgan Hill was told that they was provided information that it cost about $1 million a year in operation in subsidies. Solo actually had provided space to the citizens of Menlo Park at Menlo Atherton High School in a contract we had with them. So the city actually owed Solo over 2,000 hours of pool space. So we got behind the Menlo, behind Tim Sheeper. At that time, it was Tim Sheeper and one other person. There was not a Menlo Swim and Sport. And part of the agreement there was that Solo would be provided the lane space opportunity and the warm pool and the lap pool. That's never been the case. Solo has not been provided that, nor provided the ability to provide other instruction. So in 5 years after the organization was operating, there was our first RFP. Part of the RFP process was a request of $20,000 per month, which was the interest on the loan for Measure T. And Solo went ahead and put in the RFP and offered to pay the $20,000 per month. The contract was not awarded to Solo. We did operate Menlo Atherton High School at that time, and was awarded to the Sheep organization at a rate of $3,000 per month. At 5 years, that then was extended, and that's where it became $650,000 of taxpayer dollars to pay for the operation of the pool. The current RFP included the $650,000 as a subsidy that the city was willing to go ahead and provide, since it is already doing that. And our organization turned in our RFP, though it's not as strong as it was in the past. It did go ahead and cover the $650,000. And so as the council considers the RFP, we hope we'll be given a chance to go ahead and help the taxpayer and also be able to provide more opportunities for the citizens of Menlo Park in participating. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Chris Sturken.
Oh, good evening, City Council, Mayor Wollesen, Vice Mayor Taylor. Thank you so much for having me here this evening, excuse me. I'm Chris Sturken. I'm the events coordinator at Human Investment Project Housing, or HIP Housing. And I'm excited to be here tonight to present our 2023 HIP Housing calendar. But for anyone who may not know, we, HIP Housing, are a nonprofit located right here in San Mateo County, and we seek to provide affordable housing solutions to the community. We've been around for 50 years now, and this is one of my favorite projects to work on. So each of you should have received a copy of the calendar, and if not, it's coming soon. So each year we host a calendar contest where kids from across the county submit pictures of what home means to them and an accompanying quotes. My favorite actually is by La Yen, and it says, "Home is a place that unites people of all different races, genders, and ages. Home ensures peace and equality for all beings. Earth is everyone's shared home." So that's just one example from this year's calendar, one of the winners. And this calendar is simply a way for us to say thank you. Thank you so much for your continuing support of our important work on the peninsula. With your help this past fiscal year, we helped 3,200 people get housed or stay housed. That includes over 400 people participating in home sharing matches in our home sharing program, nearly 50 families involved in our self-sufficiency program who are pursuing their education and furthering their career, and over 600 people housed in our affordable housing, all below market rate properties. So thank you again for your support, and I hope that you enjoy the calendar, and thank you very much for having me tonight.
Thank you for your comment. So this will be the final call for public comment for items not on tonight's agenda. Seeing no further cards or hands, Mayor Willison, you may continue.
Thank you, City Clerk Karen, and thank you to our public speakers. Mr. Sturkin, the calendar is indeed very lovely and appreciated. Even more so is the work you and HIP Housing do in the community. So thank you. And City Manager Murphy, can you give an update to the public on when the RFP for the pool operations will be coming to council? If you have that, I don't mean to put you on the spot. But I know Mr. McCray commented on that, and just so those following along the process can have a sense of when we'll be discussing.
So Mayor, I don't have that exact data off the top of my head, but I see that Director Reinhardt's across the way from me. He may have the approximate time frame.
Yes, thank you, City Manager Murphy. Sean Reinhardt, Director of Library and Community Services. Right now, we're tentatively planning to bring back the RFP for City Council's review on February 14th. Might slip to February 28th, but those are the 2 dates we're looking at.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reinhardt. And as with all things, we know that agendas can get reorganized based on what's going on. So thank you for that update, just so the public has a sense of what's going on. So we are now going to move on to item or section E, presentations and proclamations. City Clerk Herron, do we have any public comments on item E1, proclamation on the National Human Trafficking Awareness Month?
Thank you, Mayor Willison. So at this time, if any member of the public wishes to speak on item E1, the proclamation for National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, please engage that hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in from a landline or a cell phone, please press *9. If participating in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to the clerk's desk. Pamela, I do see your hand raised. I will be promoting you to accept this proclamation, and you can have some time then. Perfect. And so this will be the final call for any public comment on item E1. Seeing no hands or cards, Mayor Willison, you may continue.
Thank you, City Clerk Herron. I will now read the proclamation. And before I do, I just want to state that proclamations are a fabulous opportunity for the council to elevate issues that are of great importance to our community and the world around us that we might not take time to think about in our day-to-day lives. So we greatly appreciate this coming before us this evening. Whereas the United States Senate designated January 11th as National Human Trafficking Awareness Day in 2007, and beginning in 2010 by presidential proclamation, each January has been designated National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. And whereas human trafficking involves commercial sexual exploitation and labor exploitation. Sex trafficking is defined as a commercial sex act that is induced by force, fraud, or coercion. But if the person has not attained the age of 18 years old, force, fraud, or coercion is not required. Labor trafficking is defined as the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. And whereas human trafficking is a human rights violation and a violation of both federal and California law. It also promotes the breakdown of families and communities, fuels organized crime, deprives countries of human capital, undermines public health, and imposes large economic costs. And whereas the FBI has identified California and the San Francisco Bay Area as an area of high prevalence for human trafficking. Although human trafficking is illegal, victims often do not recognize their victimization, do not know that help is available or where to seek assistance. And whereas forced labor, involuntary domestic servitude, and commercial sexual exploitation of adults and youth have been found to exist within local communities. And whereas public awareness about human trafficking still needs to reach broader communities and communicate more information about the nuances of this crime. And whereas the County of San Mateo has dedicated resources, including the San Mateo County Human Trafficking Program, and has supported the efforts of the San Mateo County Police Chiefs and Sheriff Association, and has partnered with other governmental and non-governmental organizations to identify and address human trafficking within San Mateo County. And now, therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Jen Wallison, Mayor of Menlo Park, on behalf of the City Council and City, do hereby recognize January 2023 as Human Trafficking Prevention Month and encourage council members, employees, and residents to support the County of San Mateo's efforts in the fight against human trafficking. And now I would like to introduce San Mateo County Human Trafficking Program Coordinator, Pamela Estes, to accept this proclamation.
Good evening, Mayor Willison and council members. Thank you so much. I'm pleased to be here tonight, and thank you for making time on your agenda for this important proclamation. As you said, I'm the Human Trafficking Program Coordinator for San Mateo County. This program was created in 2016 as a program in cooperation with the San Mateo County Sheriff's it's part of the Sheriff's Office, but in cooperation with the San Mateo County Police Chiefs and Sheriffs Association. And as the proclamation mentions, many people still think that human trafficking is something that happens in other countries, but it does happen here and in San Mateo County. And it happens to men and women and boys and girls, U.S. citizens and foreign nationals. The latest data that was collected by the program indicates that law enforcement and many of our agencies and organizations within our county encounter about 300 victims a year. And so those are people who've actually connected with law enforcement or a service agency, provider, case manager, et cetera, have reached out for help in some way for some type of service. And in relaying their situation, they've been identified as a victim. So there's no telling how many other people who've not reached out for help for various reasons go unnumbered or unnamed in this terrible crime. So the Human Trafficking Program hosts a monthly meeting called the Human Trafficking Initiative, and it's open to any member of the public who's interested in getting involved in the anti-trafficking movement or wants to know what the county's response is to human trafficking. And many organizations who have an active role in the response to human trafficking also participate in those meetings. So anyone's welcome to come attend, hear what's going on, or try to get involved. So I just want to ask the community to learn more about this crime so they understand how to identify it, and ask them that if they see something that they will say something. If somebody is in immediate danger, always dial 911, but there's a national human trafficking hotline that they can put in their contacts of their phone, use it anywhere they are in the United States without having to worry about what jurisdiction they're in, and they can actually report tips anonymously. And the National Human Trafficking Hotline also supports many, many different languages. And that number is 1-888-373-7888. Again, that's 1-888-373-7888. And if you need any training, if you're a part of an agency or organization that would like to learn more, I'm happy to talk to you about that. Our website is Stop Human Trafficking at smcgov.org. And so thank you for passing this proclamation tonight. I really appreciate you making the time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Estes, for being here and for raising awareness about this terrible crime. We appreciate the work you do.
Thank you so much.
We are going to move on to our next item, which is a presentation, item E2, about the recent storm events. So for that, I would like to introduce our city manager, Justin Murphy.
Great, thank you, Mayor Willison. So we do have a number of people in the audience this evening that we would like to ultimately recognize. So I'll be on the lookout for that by the end of this presentation. So at the January 5th City Council special meeting, when the council ratified the local emergency related to the storms, we said that we would report back to the City Council, and there will most likely be multiple reports in different forms. So this is our first opportunity to share information proactively about the recent storms. So with that, onto the so the three things that we're looking to highlight, excuse me, are the preparation, response, and communication. So first, in the topic of preparation. So with preparation, it occurs not just specific to the weeks or so leading up to the event, but through routine practices that the city of Menlo Park has deployed over many years. And so that includes cleaning and inspecting the storm drains on a regular basis, tree trimming that occurs on a 5-year maintenance cycle. The city maintains sandbag stations during the rainy seasons and stocking those sandbag stations. Street sweeping is part of the preparation process, and also the city is updating its storm drain master plan. So that to highlight activities in the September timeframe, there's an annual creek walk. In October, street sweeping ramps up, and there's cleaning of the Atherton Channel, which is shown in this image here, full of water, but that cleaning occurred a few months prior with coordination with the city of Redwood City. And then in the November through February timeframe, street sweeping ramps up. So as part of the, then the more specific preparation, the city is part of the a member to the San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority, and there's an annual tabletop exercise that occurs, and this year it occurred on December 7th, 2022. So there was attendance from City of Menlo Park staff, and then all the various member agencies of the Creek JPA. More specifically to the events most recent, weather monitoring began specifically on December 30th. Sandbag stations were stocked at that point in time. The city was maintaining 2 sandbag stations. That increased to 3 in the subsequent week. The Emergency Operations Center was activated virtually on the 31st. And that there's also coordination with San Francisco Creek MAC, with calls beginning on the 31st as well. So then specific to the response, and so this is where we are proud of a number of people in attendance tonight. There's multiple departments that came together to work on various assignments, and some of those assignments were above and beyond some people's typical duties of City Hall staff being stationed at sandbag stations, engineering staff that would typically be in the office out in the fields monitoring things. There's various people serving in roles in the city's Emergency Operations Center, and within our Emergency Operations Center, we had Menlo Park Fire District representatives involved as well. There's monitoring of the two major waterways in the city, the Atherton Channel and San Francisco Creek. Over these weeks, the city provided over 220 tons of sand, which equates to 11,000 sandbags that were made available to residents and businesses. And to be able to provide relief, the city suspended the overnight parking requirements through January 13th. So see, these are some of the things that were reflection of the city's response. And then one of the major impacts through these storms was the number of trees that were down. So the public works crews responded to 139 storm-related calls. Again, the focus, a number of them were down trees. So clogged drains and temporary surface flooding at several intersections. A lot of those calls come in through our police dispatch, or in addition to the essential 911 line, the city also maintains a 24/7 non-emergency call staffed by our police dispatch. So 189 total calls, again, related to the impacts to streets, down trees, and various hazards. So on the topic of communication, so the city began messaging specifically to the storm events on Monday, December 26th. On the New Year's Eve event, the city did send messages in the morning to over 9,500 residents regarding the impacts, and then sent a subsequent message later in the day, more targeted, related to San Francisco Creek and the Haven area where roadways were impacted. Through that time frame, the city team monitored the various social media channels and updated information through various channels. During this time frame, the city's webpage, the banner was focused on, across the top was focused on the storm, and then provided regular updates during that time. And again, throughout this period, there's tremendous communication within city staff, across agencies with the San Mateo County and San Francisco Creek JPA. Menlo Park is somewhat uniquely positioned at the county line, and requires enhanced coordination across multiple agencies. In terms of the types of messaging that was sent out by the city, it was related to the topic of the overall storm updates, preparation, flooding tips, the sandbags locations. And again, the city did deploy a third sandbag location during the storms, emphasizing who to contact on the down trees, and again, looking to sign up additional people to the various channels, so that we did see increased subscriptions to the city email subscriptions during this time. At this point, we don't have the ability to check on how many additional subscribers came through SMC Alert, but we're working with San Mateo County to get that access to that information. Also took this as an opportunity to continue to promote Zone Haven with the Know Your Zone evacuation routes, and that tool was used to report road closures during events, which is important given the multiple jurisdictions for roads like Middlefield that include both Menlo Park and Atherton. So there's still more information to come as we continue to assess damage. We continue to coordinate with San Mateo County on completing the necessary paperwork to continue to be eligible for funding that may come to the city, businesses, residents that may have been impacted. So we're continuing to comply with those requirements, continuing to learn from these recent events. There's tremendous opportunities to improve lessons learned, things that can be incorporated into future events, whether it's a storm-related event like this or other disasters that the city may face in the future. So at this time, I would like to take the opportunity to recognize a number of people that are in attendance, and then after that, happy to open it up to questions. So if everybody wouldn't mind potentially standing up or coming forward, would you like to come forward? Great, that'd be great. So thank you. So tonight we're looking to recognize representatives, and these are representatives of various teams. So we identified groups from Public Works, the police officers on the streets, and then our dispatch team. So these become the people that are kind of front line, either being out on the streets or first in line in receiving phone calls. So I'll start first with the Public Works team. And so, hopefully I'll get everybody going correct from left to right. And if we can get the camera, can we get the view? Okay, great. So we've got Victor Nava. He actually started with the city on January 3rd. So we're very, very grateful for him to be able to hit the ground running. And then we've got Raul Jimenez, Pablo Flores, and Mario Puido. So these four people really focused on a number of the tree incidents that occurred. Victor, Raul, and Pablo are part of our tree crew. Mario's with our parks crew, but all of them were instrumental in addressing all those downed trees that you saw in the photo. So thank you to the four of them. So then moving on with the PD. And we've got, I'm going to go across the board. We've got the Officer Galen Fleeg, Susanna Fong with dispatch, Carolina Marceau in dispatch, Corporal Ferguson, and Officer Nissen. And so again, the people that are out on the streets, there was additional the road closures, the redirecting traffic, actually going door to door to some residents based off making sure that they're aware of the flooding hazards, and then also those taking the phone calls from the public. So again, just wanted to take this opportunity to express our appreciation to them. There's a number of additional people behind them, but thank them for all their work that they're doing and coming to the council meeting this evening.
And before you sit down, the city council would like to come down and just thank you and take a picture with you. Yeah, while I sit here, while many of us were sitting at home, cozy under blankets, these folks were out there in the rain, getting their socks wet and doing the hard work for all of us. So we are so grateful. And we heard the presentation. We did our thank yous. And now City Clerk Herron, is there any public comment on that presentation?
Thank you, Mayor Willison. So at this time, if any member of the public wishes to provide comment on item E2, update on recent storms, please engage that hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in from a landline or a cell phone, please press *9. If participating in person, please feel free to complete a speaker card, return it to the clerk's desk. This will be the final call for public comment on item E2. Seeing no hands or cards, Mayor Willison, you may continue.
Thank you, City Clerk Herron. And I would now like to open it up to my council colleagues if they have any comments or questions on this item. Vice Mayor Taylor, did you have anything?
No, thank you, Mayor Willison.
Thank you. I believe City Council Member Nash has something.
I just want to echo all the thanks that have been said. Many residents reached out and people were very pleased with the response and the communication and really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Nash. We are now going to move on to F, the consent calendar. Under the consent calendar, the City Council may take action to approve routine business items in one motion unless a council member, city staff member, or a member of the public requests that an item be discussed or continued to a later date. I know that 2 City Council members had asked to discuss items, but before we get there, I'm going to ask City Clerk Herron to please call for public comment on the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mayor Willison. So at this time, if any member of the public wishes to provide comment on our consent calendar items, F1, City Council meeting minutes, F2, approval of the Housing Commission work plan, F3, a resolution authorizing the submittal for a grant related to the State Department of Water Resources Urban Community Drought Relief Program, F4, receiving and filing the City Council 2021 Priorities and Work Plan as of December of 2022. F5, a resolution for the City Council and advisory bodies to continue their meetings hybrid. F6, appointing a representative to the Bay Area Regional Water System Financing Authority. Or F7, an agreement approval with HDL companies for economic development services. Please engage that hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in from a landline or a cell phone, please press *9 now. And our first speaker will be Lauren Bigelow. And Lauren, if you can please let us know which item you are speaking on.
Good evening, council members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Lauren Bigelow, and I'm the chair of the Housing Commission, whose work plan is before you as consent item F2, but I am speaking as an individual tonight since I joined the Housing Commission in 2019, almost 4 years ago. I have had 3 different staff liaisons, which it's not in itself unusual because job duties change over time. However, I do think it is highly unusual that the reason I've had so many different staff liaisons is that our point of contact has kept leaving the city. And I've mentioned this in public comment before, but we do not have a dedicated staff person in housing right now. We have an amazing interim housing manager that we're borrowing, and we have not had one for the past 6 months. So staff recruitments take time, and I know staff will be speaking on this later in the agenda for the evening. So I wanted to bring that up. The staff that have been helping us along during that vacancy are
Lauren, it looks like we might have lost your audio.
Can you
Lauren,
still hear me?
There we go. Now we're able to hear you. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. I'll go back a little bit. So I want to acknowledge that the staff that have been helping us along during that vacancy are to be applauded for stretching themselves so much so that they can continue any work. We can continue any work at all. Unfortunately, the Housing Commission had to significantly strip down the work that they will be able to take on in the work plan over the next 6 months due to the fact that there's still a vacancy in the housing department. This could not come at a worse time, as we are at the beginning of a big and bold new housing element cycle that has made some significant promises. I'd ask the city to expend a bit more effort to find a new housing manager and also give them support staff, providing Menlo Park with the necessary capacity to follow through on its promises. I am truly worried about how much we will be able to do with this staff capacity we currently have. I do not immediately see a need to pull the item from consent calendar to have a discussion about this, because that is the reality of what we face and how we plan on moving forward with what we have. However, should any questions arise, I am here to help answer them. Thank you again for your time. Apologies for the technical difficulties. And again, thank you for your faith in our commission's work.
Thank you for your comment. This will be the final call for public comment for items on our consent calendar, items F1 through F7. Seeing no hands, Mayor Willison, you may continue.
Thank you, City Clerk Herron, and thank you, Chair Bigelow from the Housing Commission for your comment. I know that our city manager and our staff are working diligently to fill many positions, and I have no doubt that this is a priority position. I think that mostly covers it. I wish we could fill all these positions tomorrow, but I know efforts are underway and we understand the frustration and the desire. Councilmember Dorr, you wanted to pull F3 for discussion, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Willison. I wanted to turn attention to the 2022 Urban Community Drought Relief Program that the city is pursuing for some funding to support some great projects. And first, to appreciate the work that the city is doing to support ongoing system reliability for our city, to ensure that we have adequate water supplies, even in drought conditions. More of a comment, I suppose, on this item is that as we are able to take on additional drought efforts beyond this program, I think it's very important to think about how we support our neighbors who are especially vulnerable to drought, to flooding, and to increased water prices. And something I noticed in this Urban Community Drought Relief Program from the Department of Water Resources is that it specifically earmarks a portion of the funds available to support underrepresented communities and tribes. And the DWR is really excited to support projects that are working with those who are most vulnerable, and would really love to see efforts in the future as other opportunities and grant programs open up to support communities and to think about how we are showing up in our work around water to support these folks as well. So that is all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Dorr. And Vice Mayor Taylor, I believe you had comments or questions on F4.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Willison. My question is about attachment B, and what's the process for council members if they wanted to add an item to this list?
That is a fabulous question, Vice Mayor Taylor, and I'm going to have our city manager address that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So this list is new city requests or directions to advance new initiatives. So this is something that was relatively new within the past year or so, where we were trying to identify things that came up. These kind of come up in a few different fashions, but some of them may be identified through a council meeting, through a request, and we're kind of keeping track of the request. I think where it may become a difference is when what it may take to like advance a request. So this is not necessarily the reflection of the procedure that's outlined in two different documents that still need to be reconciled about how something gets actually agendized. But these requests was meant to be something that was publicly discussed at a city council meeting. So not something that was shared with in a conversation someplace, but something that was actually brought to the attention at a city council meeting. So if there's something that's, this is our attempt of trying to be comprehensive, but it could easily be that something was mentioned and we may not even have it on the list. So that's one reason why we publish the list, is so that we can get reactions to the list.
Thank you. And through the mayor, I just have one other question. And that is, if it's possible, just in the sometime in the future, if it's possible, if sometime in the future, if there could be live links so that it would take you to that staff report that's on the list, just to provide background for the public. And that was my only question and comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Taylor. That live link is intriguing idea. I think we'd all love that. We'll have staff figure out how to do that. And then I do think in some discussions I've been having with the city manager and the assistant city manager in preparation for council goal setting this year, there is going to be an attempt to potentially consolidate some of these lists because we have various different lists and it can get confusing, and then attempt to prioritize the lists. So you've touched upon something that is a known little, that prioritizing the prioritizations could be a priority unto itself. We'll just put it that way. And then also figuring out how we agendize things and how someone can introduce a new concept is also an area that we know needs to be worked on. So you've elevated a lot of policies and procedure issues that we are discussing and that we will hopefully get to as the year moves on. So thank you, Vice Mayor Taylor. Anything else, Vice Mayor Taylor?
Thank you, Mayor Willison. Motion to approve the consent calendar.
I second.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I have a motion on the floor by Vice Mayor Taylor and a second by City Council Member Doerr to approve the consent calendar. Any further City Council questions or discussion? Seeing none, by roll call vote, City Council Member Doerr.
Yes.
City Council Member Nash. Vice Mayor Taylor.
Yes.
Mayor Willison.
Yes.
And the motion passes with City Council Member Combs absent. Thank you.
Thank you, City Clerk Herron. We are now moving on to G, regular business. Under regular business, the City Council considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require City Council approval. Tonight, we have one regular business item. That is G1, provide direction regarding City Council procedure CC 860001, naming and or changing the name of facilities from 1986, and a process to identify a name for the Menlo Park Community Campus that is now under construction. To introduce our regular business item is Library and Community Services Director, Sean Reinhardt. Good evening, Mr. Reinhardt.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. Just a moment while I set up the presentation here. Trying to get it to do what I want it to do. Okay, great. Such an exciting time to be in Menlo Park with this extraordinary new community facility under construction now to serve the Bellhaven neighborhood in particular, but of course all of Menlo Park. And hopefully about a year from now, we'll be there at the grand opening of that new facility. So many preparatory steps underway to make ready for that day. And tonight, one of those steps is to discuss the naming and or renaming of facilities. So this presentation really does kind of cover all of the ground in the staff report for the benefit of the public who may be watching. There are 16 slides here. So I know there's a lot of material that council may have already read in the report, but if you could indulge me, I'll just kind of walk through it here. So first of all, the recommendation is two parts tonight. Just requesting City Council's direction and feedback on two items. One is potential revisions to City Council procedure titled Naming and or Changing the Name of Facilities. That dates back to 1986. The second item we are seeking direction and feedback from the City Council about is about a proposed process to identify the naming specifically for the facility under construction, currently known by the working name, Menlo Park Community Campus, also referred to as MPCC. Again, this is a discussion item. There's no request for City Council to take an action or name facilities or revise the policy tonight. So just want to make that clear. There'll be many opportunities for discussion about this. So just a quick overview of the naming policy. It was adopted on February 25th, 1986 by the City Council at the time. It's attached to the staff report. It's attachment A in that 1986 form. It provides guidance on the naming of city-owned facilities. It also makes references to smaller scale commemorative amenities in city parks like memorial benches. Not quite the same thing as buildings, but it's mentioned in the policy, so I mentioned it here. And again, that policy has not been revised since it was adopted in 1986. Some notable excerpts from that policy include that the Park and Recreation Commission, after considering inputs from the community, will recommend to City Council names for new buildings and miscellaneous facilities. It also notes that a naming will recognize a deceased person no sooner than 5 years after their death, or ethnic or other national and community groups that have not yet been honored in some fashion, who have made significant contributions to the city and not been previously honored in a meaningful way by the city. Other key excerpts are that the city from time to time may authorize the placement of a memorial plaque inside of a building when it's closely identified with a person or group, but the policy of the city is to retain the historic name of the facility. Also that the city's policy is not to change the name of any existing recreation and park facility unless there are extraordinary circumstances of city or national interest, and no other new facility can be designated in that way. And the policy also states that the existing place names within Menlo Park are deemed to have historic significance, and that the city will modify those place names only with great reluctance and only to commemorate a person or persons who have made really significant overriding contributions to the city and whose distinctions are not yet recognized by the city. So those were just some excerpts from the current policy. There have been some past exceptions to that policy made by past city councils, in particular to waive the policy element around waiting until 5 years after someone is deceased to honor them. For example, in 2017, the Carl E. Clark Park was named after local war hero and community leader Carl E. Clark. In 2011, the Recreation Center and Gymnastics Center on the Burgess Civic Center campus here was named in honor of real estate developer and philanthropist John Arriaga and his family. The year prior to that, the newly built gymnasium also was named the Arriaga Family Gymnasium. In 2008, Bayfront Park was renamed Bedwell Bayfront Park to honor the longtime city manager who was really instrumental in kind of preserving that park, converting it from landfill to a park. And then in 2004, the baseball field here, the Little League field at Burgess Park, was renamed in honor of former PRC Chairperson Tom Harrison. So there have been some exceptions to the policy made in the past. A note about the former Onetta Harris Community Center. Before the naming policy was adopted in 1986, the City Council in 1983 renamed the Belhaven Community Center in honor of community leader Onetta Harris, who had passed away the year prior. And the Onetta Harris Community Center bore her name from that time in 1983 until that building was demolished in 2021. It was demolished along with other facilities on that same site to make way for the MPCC. Just a little background about the MPCC project. As we all know, Facebook, now known as Meta, came forward in 2019, made the offer to look into developing a new community facility. That culminated in January and February of 2021. The City Council issued some key approvals for that project, and it's located at 100 and 110 Terminal Avenue. It's the MPCC. There's a funding and improvement agreement between the city and Facebook, again, now known as Meta, in which it states that the city reserves the sole discretion on the naming of the facility in accordance with city policies, and that would be subject to meeting and conferring with Meta. During summer of 2021, 4 facilities at the site were demolished to make way for the new facility. The Onetta Harris Community Center, the Menlo Park Senior Center, the Belhaven Youth Center, and the Belhaven Pool, all demolished to make way for the construction, which began in November of 2021 and is anticipated to be completed in 2024. Just kind of a side note about commemorative park amenities, which I mentioned earlier. Those are noted in the naming policy as kind of an aside. Last November, on November 1st, the City Council reviewed a commemorative park amenities policy to establish procedures and criteria for those smaller installations. They have shorter lifespans, are exposed to the elements, are not intended to be around a long time, just by nature of like their design. At that time, the City Council deferred action on creating a City Council policy for that and instead referred that whole process to the Parks and Recreation Commission to kind of review those and then to report back to the City Council. So you'll see the revisions, the proposed revisions to the naming policy in attachment B kind of remove those references to the commemorative amenities, to move them over to this, this procedure that City Council outlined in November. Just for a note, I think almost everyone in attendance knows the names of the facilities that had been located in Belhaven, but before construction of the MPCC began, the city operated 7 community facilities in the Belhaven neighborhood, not counting parks: the Belhaven Branch Library, Belhaven Child Development Center, Belhaven Pool, Belhaven Youth Center, Menlo Park Senior Center, Neighborhood Service Center, which is a police substation, Onetta Harris Community Center. So those were the names of all those facilities at that time. Now 5 of those facilities are going to move into the new center: the library, the pool, the youth center, the senior center, and the community center. And the other 2, of course, will remain in their current locations: the Child Development Center and the Neighborhood Service Center. There is significant community interest in the new facility's name, as totally understandable and expected. It's a major project that will be serving the community for a very long time. Some have expressed a desire to honor Onetta Harris in the new facility's name. Some have expressed a desire to highlight the historic Belhaven neighborhood. Some have suggested like a naming contest with community entries, some kind of selection process there. Some have offered the idea, the observation and the idea of attaching names or dedications to each of the 5 major functions in the building: the community center, the library, the senior center, youth center, and the aquatic center, as well as one overall name for the facility in the campus, because it will be one facility. So that was all the background, and just kind of turning here, we have a few slides left about kind of the direction of feedback we're seeking tonight. And the first is about potential revisions to the naming policy. And those are in attachment B. They're kind of shown in that kind of editing format, so you can see the changes. The intent there is to align the policy with the current City Council expectations and community interests, since the current policy is almost 40 years old at this point. Also to establish criteria and procedures for naming and renaming and or dedicating public facilities, and in particular, when there are major programs housed together in a single multi-service facility like the MPCC. Also to establish some criteria for recognizing individuals or groups who donate toward the cost of new or renovated facilities, not currently addressed really in the policy. And also to go ahead and refer the criteria for those commemorative park amenities out of this policy and into that the other process with the PRC that the council set forth in November. So that's the naming policy. And then the second piece is about the proposed process and timeline for naming the new facility under construction, the MPCC. So staff's requesting direction and feedback about the process, in particular to identify a name and or dedication for the overall facility, then names and or dedications for each of the 5 major programs that will be housed in there, and also regarding recognitions for individuals or groups who make donations towards the facility's opening day costs. So about that process and timeline that's being proposed, we're almost at the end here, but just walk through quickly kind of the dates. The recommendation is starting with tonight, City Council providing direction and feedback on the proposed naming policy revisions and the proposed process for naming the MPCC, then followed by the Parks and Recreation Commission at their February meeting, which is February 22nd, open a study session to consider input from the community, any direction from the City Council offered tonight about the process, about the naming policy. Also that same night, the PRC, Parks and Recreation Commission, opening a 4-week public comment period for inviting Menlo Park residents to offer their input, suggestions about naming or dedicating a new facility in each of the 5 major programs. The city staff would conduct outreach in English and Spanish in multiple formats throughout the community, establish systems to collect and compile all the input that we'll receive from the community on this topic. So all that starts up on February 22nd by this timeline. Then a couple weeks later, a few weeks later, March 14th would be the next opportunity for the City Council to review and adopt any revisions to the naming policy, such as those that are proposed here in Attachment B, or to reaffirm the current policy if no revisions are desired. And then on March 22nd, which would be 4 weeks after the previous PRC meeting, it convened another meeting. It's a regularly scheduled meeting to consider all the input and City Council feedback and direction, and then recommend up to 3 potential names and or dedications for the overall new facility, and up to 3 potential names and or dedications for each of those 5 major programs that would be located within it. Just a side note, the Library Commission also will have their meeting on February 27th in February, which is after the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting, and the intent is for the naming policy and process to also be on the Library Commission's agenda in February. I'm sorry that wasn't listed here on the staff reporter presentation, but that's the intent. And then finally, on March 28th, the intent would be for the City Council to review all of that input, including the PRC's recommendations, and then select a name or dedication for the overall facility, as well as for each of the 5 major components. And that timeline is important from the standpoint of having enough lead time to actually manufacture, to fabricate the signs while we're constructing the facility. So really looking to kind of have that identified at the end of March. Might be possible for it to slip a little bit, but time is of the essence in order to make sure that we're able to fabricate those signs in time for the building to open. And that kind of wraps up the presentation. Here again are those kind of 2 main discussion points for reference. City staff will pursue the revisions and process and timeline outlined here in the presentation and the staff report, unless City Council directs otherwise. So that concludes the presentation, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reinhardt, for that very thorough presentation. I think we'll go straight to public comment on this item and then return after for City Council questions and discussion. So City Clerk Karen, can you please call for public comment on this item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Willison. So at this time, if any member of the public wishes to speak on our regular business item G1, provide direction regarding city council procedure for naming and/or changing the name of facilities and a process to identify a name for the Menlo Park Community Campus project now under construction, please engage that hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in from a landline or a cell phone, please press *9 now. This will be the final call for public comment for item G1. Seeing no hands, Mayor Willison, you may continue.
Thank you very much, City Clerk Herron. City Clerk Herron. So there are a couple pieces of information that staff, excuse me, is seeking direction on. And I do want to reiterate Mr. Reinhardt's last point that he made, which basically is staff is preparing to move forward with the recommendations they've outlined unless we have changes that we want to direct them to make. So I'd like to open it up to my colleagues at this time to discuss first the policy. We're going to bifurcate this, and first I'd only like you to address the first half on the naming policy. So if you have questions or comments about that, please speak up. I am seeing Vice Mayor Taylor's hand raised. Yes, please, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Willison. I am comfortable with the potential revisions to the naming policy by staff.
Thank you. Councilmember Dorr.
Yes, I'd like to echo that comfort and support that language.
This might be a lot easier than we thought because we're seeing nodding heads on the dais. So I think we have consensus on the naming policy. With that, we're going to be moving on to the process and timeline on the MPCC, specifically the facility. Before we get into too deep, I do want to highlight that right now, the way it's written, the Parks and Rec Commission staff and the community will be contemplating not just a name for the entire facility, but 5 additional names for different components of the facility. And before we go too far down the road, because that could be up to 18 names that folks would be spending a lot of time on, I wanted to get a sense from council if you had any thoughts on whether we should indeed be pursuing only one name for the facility, or whether we do indeed want to also be pursuing the different component names as well. So Vice Mayor Taylor, I see your hand raised.
Thank you, Mayor Willison. And while Mr. Reinhardt was doing the presentation, my first thought was that the study session should happen first so that we can hear what the community wants. It would actually help council with their direction by getting community input first.
So to clarify, Vice Mayor Taylor, you would like to have the community weigh in on whether they want one facility name only or one facility name plus 5 component names?
Yes.
Okay.
And just thinking about that, I mean, I can visualize it is seeing, I mean, it's what was before, essentially. And is that to be continued with an overall name over the facility and then have the individual names? But I'd really like to hear, especially since we didn't have any public comment, we did get one letter on CCIN, but that's just my thought. And then also, if it's possible, and I did not talk to the city manager about this, to have the study session and make it a joint study session with library and Parks and Rec, as opposed to 2 separate meetings.
So Mr. Reinhardt, if I can direct those comments and questions to you about the possibility of making a joint meeting and then of having the commissions weigh in first on this first question that I'm asking my colleagues up here on whether there should be one overall name or one plus the component names?
Yes, thank you for the questions. Let's see, regarding input from the study session on February 22nd, prior to the city council weighing in, that whatever the city council directs, that's fine with, from the staff perspective, makes a lot of sense actually, especially since there were no public comments this evening. Regarding the potential for the Library Commission and Parks and Recreation Commission to have another joint meeting in February, it's possible. However, staff wouldn't recommend that because the Parks and Recreation Commission and Library Commission are meeting in joint session tomorrow night, actually to talk about programming for the new facility. And there's a little bit of a challenge with their other agenda items getting kind of backed up. If they have another joint session next month that's really focused on a topic that I think would take all of the time. Now the Parks and Recreation Commission, up per the naming policy, is the body that would kind of lead the collection of that community input. The Library Commission certainly is an excellent venue for some public comment on that, in particular as it pertains to like the Belhaven Branch Library name. And this item absolutely can be placed on the Library Commission agenda. I believe their meeting in February will be February 27th, which is 5 days after the PRC meeting. However, if the City Council feels strongly we want to have one single meeting, we would certainly work with the commissions to make that happen in February as well.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Taylor, any thoughts on how strongly you feel about a joint meeting versus the separate meetings?
I'm fine with either. Just was a question to see if that would be more efficient for staff.
Okay, Councilmember Nash has a comment.
So I actually think I have no concerns about the two commissions separately meeting in February, but when they actually go back and consider the input, I would strongly prefer that it's actually, I would like to have a joint meeting with both library and Parks and Rec considering the input, because I think that you just get a much broader perspective.
Through the mayor, if I may, just in response to Councilmember Nash's suggestion to clarify, you're referring to like their March meeting when they kind of make the recommendations?
That's correct. The March 22nd meeting, the Parks and Rec convenes a public meeting to consider community input and recommend to City Council. And I do think that the Library Commission would greatly help that discussion. Just having more folks in the room.
Yes.
But
thank you for the suggestion. I think that's a really good suggestion, and I'll bring it back to the commissions. I think that would work from their agenda management standpoint, because then in February they still can tackle a few other items and then come back together in March.
Councilmember Dorr has a question.
Yes, thank you. Under looking at February 22nd, the public study session, I'd like to hear, are there any more details about that session, where it'll be taking place, and any more specifics about will any local partners be involved in the creation and preparation for that meeting? Anything you can offer? Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Not sure if we have the level of detail regarding potential community partners that we would like specifically do outreach to. We certainly will do outreach to the entire community, and the meeting would of course be open to the public, and the more input, the better. I think the intention is to, excuse me, have the in-person aspect of the meeting take place at the Belhaven Branch Library. Obviously that's in the neighborhood, and I think it's the only place in the neighborhood right now where we could have a meeting like that. So I hope that answers your question. If there, as far as like the details around what how the meeting will unfold, we probably would have a little bit of background information, kind of similar to this evening. I think we did get some clear direction from the City Council earlier that the proposed revisions to the naming policy are acceptable, so we would kind of incorporate that, and then kind of lay out the different ways that the public can make those suggestions. And we'll probably by then be able to kind of devise like a categorization or compilation schema that folks can kind of respond to and react. But really the intention is to introduce the topic, open the public comment, 4-week public comment period, and kind of start that process.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to hear that the meeting will happen directly in Belhaven, because I think that'll be really important. Making sure there's also an online remote version opportunity to join that meeting would also be really helpful, I think, to make sure everyone can access it no matter what. And one potential suggestion is, after seeing the site last week, I know that there are some nonprofits and other community groups that use the spaces and have used the facilities previously. And so I wonder if partnering with them to make sure that they know, and the folks that use those nonprofits or use those community groups are aware of this process as well would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dorr. I am seeing a hand raised, so I'm going to go ahead and reopen public comment. So if there are any attendees who have desired to speak on this item, please raise your hand and City Clerk Herron will be reopening public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Willison. So again, we are reopening public comment for our regular business item G1. And our first speaker is Israel Harris.
Hello.
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you. I'm currently a part of the study group for the naming of the facility. I do endorse the idea of combining and having a joint meeting with the library group. Also, I would like to suggest to possibly just focus the naming of the facility to one name, or have the public opinions be made for the five names within the five primary names within the facility, as opposed to all 18. That might allow a better response from the public, instead of possibly receiving input from all 18.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, so this will be the final call for public comment on regular business item G1. Our next speaker is Pam Jones. Pam, you should be.
I've unmuted myself. Thank you. Pam Jones, resident of District 1, to Mayor Willison, Vice Mayor Taylor, and our council members. Thank you for moving through this item. I would like to make sure that the meetings are in Spanish. We have a large Spanish-speaking population that does use the facilities, and translation, real-time translation is very important. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, so this is the final call for public comment on regular business item G1. Seeing no further hands, Mayor Willison, you may continue.
Thank you, City Clerk Herron, and thank you to Ms. Jones and Mr. Harris for your comments. And I saw a lot of nodding up here when Ms. Jones, you were talking about Spanish translation. I think, agree strongly with that. And I would suggest not just for the Parks and Rec meetings, but at a minimum for the March council meeting as well, if not the February one as well, given the makeup of the folks that might be interested in this topic. And then to Mr. Harris's point about looking at 5 names more than 18, you're completely right. I think I was just doing a mathematical calculation in my head of 5 components times 3 alternatives, but I would imagine that there'll be a list that's being considered, and then whittling it down from there. So thank you for pointing that out. And thank you for being part of the task force that it's working on this, or on the campus in general. So it sounds like council members have been weighing in on the process, expressing their desire for a joint library Parks and Rec Commission meeting, it being in those meetings taking place as much as possible in the Belhaven neighborhood, of Spanish translation, and of a lot of community input, even on whether we're doing just one name or multiple names. Is there any other feedback that the council has or questions that the council has about naming the MPCC facility at this time, the process, the timing? Yeah, Councilmember Nash.
Just from hearing everything, it sounds like, and I believe this is what you just said, that we should lean toward doing 6 names, the one for the overall facility and the 5 individual components. And unless there's a reason, unless it community input is that is not desired. But I would, if you need feedback right now, I certainly think that that's the direction that I think, no?
That's not the,
so I'm just looking at the timeline and wondering how we can get the feedback, how the feedback would work in time to actually, because when we're getting the feedback is probably at the meeting of the 22nd and the next 4 weeks. So I guess I would like to hear from Mr. Reinhardt.
Well, and can I jump into just to build on that question? When we're talking about naming, I'm calling them components, but the pool, the teen center, whatever the different areas are we talking about naming after distinguished individuals or folks? Or are we talking about how we're going to name the aquatic center? Right, but if we don't name them, they'll still have a way. There'll still be a way to refer to them. It'll just be, it would be like the pool versus the aquatics pool. Yeah.
Through the mayor, if I may. So all great observations. I think the intent of the Parks and Recreation Commission recommending up to 3 names is to provide some flexibility and some options for the city council to consider when the recommendations make their way to you. Certainly staff can, kind of help guide the process to really focus in on making like a single recommendation for the name. Maybe I think to Vice Mayor Taylor's point, after the February 22nd initial study session, we might have a better sense of what the community is interested in there. Do we have like really a lot of strong, name recommendations where we might need to have a few options, or is it really coalescing around something where only one is really going to be recommended? And then related to the 5 components, there are, all 5 of those components currently still kind of exist in the interim services form. Certainly the facilities have been demolished and there's this new facility to replace them. So some positive affirmation of what the names of each of those components will be, I think would be welcomed. I don't want to speculate, but since there were, names for those functions in the past, that's kind of a starting point for that conversation. So I don't want to get ahead of the process and we'll let that play out, but there is a little bit of precedent there that, might make that process a lot simpler than having, like 15 names come forward just for those items. But we won't know till we get there.
Thank you. And I think my intention with leading off with whether we should look at 1 name or 5 was just to see if there was enough to continue the conversation. And there's plenty to continue the conversation with the Parks and Rec Commission. So, and with the community to weigh in on. So for those of you following along and wanting to participate, we very much encourage you to take advantage of these opportunities, probably in person, online. Is there going to be a survey or an email that people can write to? It says that there's going to be multiple channels, ways. Can you elaborate a little bit on those?
Yes, thank you for the invitation to elaborate a little bit. Certainly in English and Spanish, without question, that's thing one. Our typical channels, there's email blasts, there are the city's social media channels, I think Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor being the primary ones, of course, the city's website, but also on paper. So I've been working with the public engagement manager to develop probably like a postcard specifically to like the Bellhaven neighborhood in particular, just to make sure that folks have that visceral notification. They might not subscribe to email or text messages or pay attention to them. And then in addition, all of the city's recreation and library facilities do have physical suggestion boxes in the building. So we would be able to collect paper feedback that way. We're looking at developing a survey. It may be that we want to keep it a little more open-ended, but between now and February 22nd, we might have a little bit more concrete kind of idea what that might look like.
Thank you. Are there any other council questions or comments on this item? Okay, then I think we are going to ask staff if you have what you need from us to get ready for the next step.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, this has been extraordinarily helpful. I seek no further direction at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reinhardt. So we then do not need a motion or a vote because this was just for direction. Great. We are moving on to informational items. Informational items are transmitted to the City Council in staff's effort to provide an update on matters of importance to the City Council. Informational items are not action items. However, a City Council member, city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. City Clerk Karen, do we have any public comments on the informational items?
Thank you, Mayor Willison. So at this time, if any member of the public wishes to speak on our informational items, H1, City Council agenda topics, H2, update on Middle Avenue project, H3, the Menlo Park Community Campus project updates, H4, personnel activity report update through December of 2022, or H5, electric vehicle charging for city operations update, please engage that hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in from a landline or a cell phone, please press *9 now. This will be the final call for public comment on our informational items, H1 through H5. And our first speaker will be Marlene Santoyo.
Hi, council members. I had a comment on H3. I just was thinking about the community meetings that are happening on February 9th and 10th on the environmental justice and safety element. And one of the areas of the environmental justice element is improving access to public facilities where residents may probably provide input about like the community center and the renovations for it and ways of improving access to it. And so if there's a way to channel those the feedback that is taken in during those meetings into the process of the community campus center and the other meetings that are happening alongside that. I don't have like the clear like ask about what's the best way to do that, but just putting it out there as a suggestion for you to consider a way to do that. Because there's we're expecting a big turnout there, and if we can use the public's input and feedback into what is going on with the community center and the programming around it, I think that's a big opportunity to help residents in meeting their needs. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. This will be the final call for public comment on our informational items H1 through H5. Seeing no hands, Mayor Willison, you may continue.
Thank you. And thank you to Ms. Santoya for pointing out, first of all, that the environmental justice and safety elements are going to be having community meetings on February 9th and 10th. And that is a really great opportunity to seek not only feedback on that, but if we have an audience that we need other information from, to solicit feedback at that time, or at least let people know what's going on. So I would encourage staff to take advantage of that audience to do so as another great communication channel. And thank you for that suggestion. Does City Council have any comments or questions? We're going to be hearing a lot more about Middle Avenue in the future. Obviously, the Menlo Park Community Campus, there's some agenda items coming up later. A lot of this stuff is just previewing, and thank you, staff, for getting this to us ahead of time so we can start to digest and residents can start reaching out with their feedback. But at this time, are there any brief comments or questions on these items? Great. Then we are moving on to the city manager's report. And I would again like to ask City Manager Justin Murphy to see if there's anything he'd like to share.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I am excited to share something that's referenced previously in an info item H4 regarding personnel activity. Has been stated at previous meetings, we've been able to fill some key positions. So one new face that you'll see this evening is Brittany Mello, coming to us from the city of Huntington Beach. Her first day was last Tuesday. She's hit the ground running with participating in the preparation of the staff report for H4. So she's our new administrative services director. So we're very excited to have her on board, because that's the critical function to being able to increase our recruitment retention efforts. So excited to have her on board as part of the team. So in addition, I'd like to identify, put in a plug for next Tuesday's special council meeting, the 31st, on the city's housing element. So January 31st is the state deadline for the council to adopt the housing element, and that date was identified a few months ago for scheduling this special meeting. So the staff report and agenda are scheduled to be released this Thursday. It'll be the only topic on the agenda. Meeting starts at 6 o'clock, and it's important for the council to take action on the housing element that night. And so then the last thing I'd like to identify is the city is working on reestablishing the council goal setting or project priority work plan process this year based off scheduling. It's most likely not to occur until the March timeframe. We were hoping for February, but the schedules didn't work for February, but we are looking to do an information item about the process at the first meeting in February. February 14th is what we're targeting for the info item to outline the process, and that by that time we should have the specific date in March for the meeting. We are targeting a Saturday in March for that workshop. So those are a few updates for this evening.
Thank you, City Manager Murphy. I will now ask my colleagues if they have any reports that they would like to share out. Councilmember Nash.
Thank you. I would just like to call people's attention to a white paper from Peninsula Clean Energy that is receiving national attention. It's called Achieving 24/7 Renewable Energy by 2025. And essentially, PCE, Peninsula Clean Energy, provides 100% renewable energy for customers in San Mateo County and Los Banos. And they do provide it at a net 5% discount in generation charges compared to PCE. So people with who are on Peninsula Clean Energy electricity automatically are getting a 5% discount. this is doing is it's an industry-leading goal of matching the customer demand with 100% renewable energy on an hourly basis rather than on an annual basis. And what Peninsula Clean Energy, they've been working on it for a while. The staff has been doing all sorts of algorithms that are just mind-boggling. You can see them in the paper. What they've found is that the goal of matching the demand of renewable energy, so providing 100% renewable energy to customers at a time sensitive, so directly when the demand is being made, is actually cost competitive, first of all, possible, and also that it's cost competitive. And so this is actually just really good news and very, very exciting. And anyone who wants to look at the paper can find it on the Peninsula Clean Energy website under news. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Nash. I see Vice Mayor Taylor's hand raised.
Thank you, Mayor Willison. And I am going to work from today and work backwards for the past 2 weeks. Today I attended it's actually a new task force that was put together. It's called Local Electeds Regional Task Force, and it is designed to have elected officials from cities and counties across the 9 County Bay Area. The task force will ensure that local efforts and interests are successfully married with regional goals as the Bay Area develops its first regional shoreline adaptation plan. It will include environmental justice communities, legacy contamination, natural habitats, new and redevelopment, critical infrastructure, and transportation. And today was the kickoff meeting. The timeline is from January 2023 until May 2024 when the report will be submitted. Now, going backwards, actually, let me go forwards for a minute. This Thursday, there is an SBWMA meeting. There is also an Emergency Services Council meeting. Last Tuesday, there was an SFO technical working group meeting. The discussion is about how to submit or which new flight plans do we want to recommend to the FAA. And essentially, I am asking that Menlo Park is not flown over. I'm not sure if that's actually going to happen. Going backwards, last Thursday, there was an Reimagining Public Safety meeting, and I am not prepared to actually submit a verbal report other than we are working on it. So hopefully on Tuesday, I will have that report to read out. And going backwards again, 2 weeks ago on January 12th, there was a CCAG meeting. We have a new person appointed to fill our Assembly Member Pappin's seat on One Shoreline, which is Mayor Adam Rack. That happened at the CCAG meeting, and that is all I have to report
out. Councilmember Dorr.
Yes, thank you. This last Thursday, I had a chance to attend the first that I was able to attend for the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, BOSCA for short. The agency serves 1.8 million water users, about south of San Francisco and Oakland and the entire Bay Area. So 26 different governing bodies or agencies that are part of that, and we are one of those. And we heard reports from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission about how the recent storms have affected our snowpack and water levels. We're looking pretty good, but there's still, uncertainty in where our water will come from and look like in the coming years. But a lot of positivity over the rain helped us in some ways. And getting those levels up. And they also talked about opportunities to address leaks in water systems and improve water efficiency. Menlo Park got a special call out for implementing its drought surcharge, and they highlighted other ways that other cities are doing great things, like San Jose is prohibiting turf, high water use plans and overhead sprinkler systems in new constructions. Daly City has a recycled water program for outdoor irrigation. North County North Coast County Water District has a rain barrel purchase program that is well received by their customers. So a lot of exciting things are happening by our city and other cities to address water needs. And they also shared a little bit at BOSCA about the Bay Delta Plan, which is, would encourage folks, if you're curious about that, to look it up, about how to determine where and how we get our water from the Tuolumne River. And more conversations around that will be forthcoming with BOSCA. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dorr. I think I'm the last one. So yesterday I attended an event with City Manager Murphy and Deputy City Manager Nagaya at the Ravenswood PG&E substation. That included many people from PG&E, including their CEO. Climate Resilient Communities was there representing the community. The San Mosquito Creek JPA executive director was there. And it was all about partnership, working together to shore up our shoreline. So the FEMA grant that has been applied for $50 million to build levees to protect the PG&E substation is moving its way through the bureaucratic process. But people are feeling optimistic, and it was really a celebration of partnership of various agencies coming together. And so I just wanted to thank our partners and our city staff for working so hard to safeguard our beautiful city as the risk of flooding and sea level rise continues to loom. I guess, on a more cheerful note then, is on Friday, city council members have been invited to attend a League of Cities event that is a little unique. Usually it's done by county, or it's the Council of Cities. It's various different conglomerations of city councils across the area, but this one on Friday is a little special because it's both San Mateo County and Santa Clara County councils, and the city council members from different cities will be joined by state legislators, including those who represent Menlo Park. I believe State Senator Josh Becker, Assembly members Mark Berman and Diane Pappen will be there, and they'll be giving us legislative updates. So I encourage my colleagues, if you're going to attend one of those League of City events, that this seems like the one to try to make it, and that's in South San Francisco. And you should have all received an invitation. So if there is nothing more from my colleagues, it is 7:45 and I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.